The worst day of my life became the best day of my life. You no longer have to suffer from terminal uniqueness. He said there's three A's that all change: awareness, acceptance, and action. And he said most people think that awareness is the hardest part of the change.
Welcome to the Growing the Future podcast. My name is Dan Aberhart, and today with me I have somebody who is a Canadian leadership coach. He is a keynote speaker, and he's a poet. If he didn't know it, he knows it now because it's in the intro. He is the author of Addiction to Poetry, and he's launching a podcast called Lean In to Lead. He was recently featured on Corliss Russell's Conversations with Corliss podcast in an episode called Change Your Someday to Today, and Corliss was, of course, at the Convergence Conference. And his whole thing is values-driven leadership. I really like this. We're going to get into it today, talking about blending business strategy with emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and raw storytelling. So I was joking with Trevor before we got going here in the green room. Look, folks, I know Growing the Future Productions, we've been bringing lots of great nuts and bolts farming stuff to you, but this isn't going to be a conversation about where potash is going or how to adjust your seeder or what's the next fuel spike out there, how to adjust your crop insurance. This individual is such a great person to share where he's at and what he's gone through, and he has an extraordinary story, and he really helped me at a time too when I've been going through a lot of transition and changes. So between him and Corliss, they become fantastic mentors and friends, and just somebody that I wanted to have this conversation with selfishly, and I hope you get value out of it. If you're someone who's very driven and going through all the different metamorphoses that we do in life and especially business, this individual coaches leaders to move from disconnection to clarity and from pressure to aligned performance. And the core message is you can't lead others unless you're really honest with yourself. And recently I attended this leadership course with this individual and Corliss. And I want to tell that story here before we get rolling, just to give some context. But welcome to the show, Trevor Muir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here and looking forward to having a good chat with you.
Yeah, so I am super excited about this. And we were talking before we started the recording. I'm like, dude, I got to start recording because you just share so much, and I'm so into this conversation. And we're going to cover a lot of ground here. But we also want to let the conversation breathe and take the audience on that journey with us. But just for some context, we got connected through Corliss Russell, who spoke at the Convergence Conference. It's just been a bright light in my life since I met her. Really resonated, really connected instantly with Corliss. And I know you had that experience as well. So in this business transition I've been going through, I decided to take a chance and invest in this leadership course with you and Corliss. And we experienced quite a journey together. And frankly, what was it? When did it start? It was in January or something, wasn't it? January,
Yeah.
February?
February. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago because so much has happened in the business and in life. And things are going really well. But when I started in the course, when I went to introduce myself and go through the worksheet, I couldn't even get through it because I was bawling my eyes out because of everything that was happening in my life and my business. And it was starting to turn a corner, but it wasn't there. And that was really the low moment. The day we started the course was like the dip, like the bottom of the dip for me the night before, the day before. And I woke up like in a crazy place. And so here I was on this call with you and Corliss and, 4 or 5 other manly men. I'm talking
Man.
like there's guys in their oil field coveralls sitting in their probably $140,000 pickup on Zoom on their phones with their PPE or whatever. And
Yeah.
here I'm just sitting there like, trying to get it out. And like, so I started bawling like a little baby, broke down, tried to get through all this and tell my life story or whatever. But the sharing, like we kind of reviewed it at the end of the session. And one of the guys said, Dan, when you just opened up the taps and it just gave us all room to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And what I was terrified because I thought, like, what are these guys going to say? Like, I look like a fool, like I look like an idiot. But every person in that room, it doesn't matter about the sex, but it happened to be male dominated. But where usually I go to Corliss's webinars or whatever, and there's like 20 women. So
Yeah.
because she does work with a lot of women, but I was just like, each of the guys had their own moment after me. And it was kind of like Convergence when I realized people so much want to share. And when you get in that space, and I couldn't help it, it wasn't a conscious thing. And that's just a little bit of who I am. But everyone, like, it didn't matter. Like, these are all like rough and tough guys that are leaders, they're fathers, they're guys you'd see at your church, maybe played football with them. Like, there's nothing feminine about it. But we all shared so much in that space. And it helped me. I'm an awesome testimonial because whatever you guys did to program my brain, like, I'm winning now. Things have been going really good in my life, and the change has been so visceral. And I didn't even know how low I was before. And I think that's something that we want to cover too, is how low you can get, because you're a guy. I don't know how many millions of dollars are involved in your life, from a financial point of view, but you're like, let's just clarify, you're a CEO guy, like, which is, you've done it. You've run big companies, hundreds of people, tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. You're highly qualified to talk about business and leadership, having lived it. But what an experience. And thank you for that, Trevor. And it's an honor to have you here to talk more with you about all these things, because we're going to cover it some more.
Well, I appreciate that. And so we've done a couple of those classes now, and that's what we've really found. And I have, and they've been all males who've actually joined the first two sessions. And Corliss is, I mean, she's such a great leader herself, and an instructor, and she takes people, through a journey, and to be a part of that with her has been amazing. I love her very much. But the openness that I found, and the vulnerability that I found in those rooms with typically type A males, farmers and oil field workers, and when I would say, oftentimes with those type of people, they'd rather get punched in the nose in the parking lot than talk about their feelings. Yet very quickly, and certainly in this group as well, it was immediate. And it takes people like you who come in with that vulnerability to allow people to open up. And I went through a really dark time in my life, at a time where I had everything that I believed I ever wanted or needed. I had co-founded SurePoint with 9 friends. I was 32 years old, I think, and or 31, and 10 of us start this company, 10% each. We're all out of Grand Prairie, Alberta, a bunch of farm kids. And we end up, then there was one guy who kind of was older than us and had brought us all together. And in 5 years, we went from $4 million to over $50 million. And I mean, we're tradespeople, and we're just going to work every day. And we ended up selling the company to a private equity group in 2008. And from 2008 to 2013, our business kept growing. We hit 92 million-ish in revenue, top line revenue, from in 9 years. But the wheels were coming off. We were losing money. Things are going for shit. And so was my life, to be honest with you. From 2008 to 2012, the company was doing this and falling apart, and I was falling apart. And 3 or 4 years after we had sold the business, I'd had the fancy acreage, the sports car in the garage, the horses, the toys in the shop, like everything, and money in the bank, and a beautiful wife and son, and close to my parents and close to my sisters, and have a friend network, and all this stuff. And yet my life was going for shit. And I woke up 3 years later. I'm separated from my wife for a while, living in this really fancy ass condo downtown Edmonton. And I wake up on a bathroom floor with an overwhelming desire to end my life. And here I was, the guy who had everything, and I was always good. If you asked me, even at that time, I'd moved out of my house, and people would say, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Good." "Yeah, good." It's always open. My wife and I aren't together. I moved out. She doesn't want me around. I'm not talking to my son, but he turned 18, so that's just what happens. And I might get booted out of the company that I co-founded, but honestly, it's been a long time. It's probably for the best. And I'd be like, "So yeah, pretty good." The reality is, when I went back into that condo at night, I was like a 5-year-old boy afraid of the dark. I would literally lock every door in that thing, and I would most of the times eat my supper in the dark in the bedroom, and I'd lay in the fetal position, and I'd get up the next day, and I would go to work, and I'd push myself out. And I started binge drinking a lot. And one day I woke up in that condo on a bathroom floor with an overwhelming desire to end my life. And that was the worst day of my life, became the best day of my life. It was the catalyst for change. I got up off the floor, and you were talking about at the beginning of the workshop, the master class, how your emotions just came out and you were crying. I remember laying on that bathroom floor and wanting to cry so bad. and I had tears start to come down my eyes. And I got up off the floor and I was like, fuck this. I am not going to cry. I refuse to cry. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, I am not crying. And I was washing my face. And for the first time that I could ever remember as an adult, my eyes caught my eyes. And I thought, what would I tell a friend if they told me that they felt how I felt, in spite of the fact they had all the stuff, like the toys, the money, and the wife, and the kid, and the family, but felt the way I felt. And I thought, if a friend told me that, I would say, oh, I get it. I totally get it. And both are true. Please don't give up. Please get help. And in that moment, I grabbed my phone, started Googling help, and ended up reaching out randomly to a life coach because I didn't want to go to a psychiatrist or psychologist. I was like, I don't want people to think I'm crazy. Found this life coach, sent her a note randomly. She got back to me, and I didn't say anything other than, "Hey, I'd like to come in and see you, going through some stuff. If you have an opening." She got back to me 30 minutes later, and I believe it was divine intervention now. 30 minutes later, and she had a cancellation for the next day, which is unheard of to get into somebody that quickly. I went and saw her the next day, and my life began to change from that experience. She actually asked me how I was doing. So I walk in and I'm like, I'm good. Wife kicked me out. Son's not talking to me. Might lose my job. Career I've spent this company but otherwise it's awesome. And she was like, you're not good, and that's not okay. And I was like, no, I'm totally okay. She said, no, you're not. And then she said, I'm very worried about you, and I can't help you. She said, but do not leave this office. Promise me you won't leave this office. I have to go get somebody. And I'm like, I am fine. And she's like, you're not fine. Please don't go. I have to go. And she said, I'll be back in 2 minutes. And she came back, and she with this big dude, and he put his hand out and said, hey, Trev, I'm Dr. Gons. I'm here going through some stuff. And I was like, I'm fine. She's got me freaked out. I'm okay. He's like, I'm sure you are. Pulled me into another room for about 10 minutes, talked to me, and had me come the next day to see him. And she pulled him out of a session. And that man helped, her and him helped save my life. And she saw something, she saw through the crap, which probably most people would have. And then he helped put me on a different path. And so one of the things that I learned from all of that, and there's a whole story to that, and I learned about the champagne glass pyramid from him, the thing that we taught in the master class, and how you have to fill yourself first. And I learned a whole bunch of things, but one of the things I learned from that experience was I felt like nobody would ever understand. Nobody would ever understand how I feel. And I was always like, hey, I have the stuff. I shouldn't feel this way. I have the wife and kids. And I could look around, and I'm a positive person, and I could see how bad everyone else had it. And I thought, how unfair of me. Like, what is wrong with me that I'd feel this way? And a few years later, lots of inner work, and lots of help. And I had a mentor in my life say to me one day, he said, I have great news for you, Trev. I said, what's that? He said, you no longer have to suffer from terminal uniqueness. And I was like, ouch. And then
You
and
thought
that's
you were
my
special.
feelings. I'm a sensitive guy. And then he followed up with this. He said, when you come and you talk about, what's going on in your life, he says, great that you're being open. But he said, you have a different wife, different son, you look different, you sound different, different color hair, different job, drive a different truck. Lots of things are different. But when you talk about how you're feeling, he said, every single person can identify with that. And he said, we are all the same at an emotional level. I'm paraphrasing. And I went on a mission to prove or disprove this. So I travel all over the world, and I've been very fortunate. And I was like, is this true? And so I talked to everybody and basically asked them a lot of the same questions, just to get to know them. But it's like, hey, how's it going? You got a girlfriend, you got a wife, you got a whatever. And so I talked to the poorest people I could find on the planet and the richest person that I know on the planet. And the poorest were on Mount Kilimanjaro when I went and hiked to the top of the mountain. And so our guides are there. And I remember talking to two guides specifically quite a bit. They were young. And I said to the one guy, hey, you got a girlfriend? And he's like, oh, boss, I did have a girlfriend. I'm like, what do you did? And he goes, He goes, yeah, we broke up. And I'm like, you dumped her? And he goes, no, she dumped me. I'm like, oh, when? And you could see him get teary-eyed. He said, right before I came on the mountain. And I'm like, oh, dude, we talked through it. And then I say to this other guy, I'm like, how about you? You married, you got a girlfriend? He said, I'm married. And I said, oh, you got kids? Yeah, two girls, young. And I'm like, oh man, and you spend all this time on the mountain? And he goes, yeah, and he lights up. He says, I don't like being away from my kids, but he goes, the mountain gives me the money so I can put them in school. I never got to get an education. And then I said, does your wife have a to-do list for you when you get home and you got a bunch of shit to do? He's like, yeah. I'm like, what the hell? Like you work your ass off, right? And we laugh. And I said, how are your parents? And he goes, oh, I worry about my dad. And he said, I miss my wife and my family, but I do this for them. And I've asked doctors, farmers, school teachers, every person that I tradespeople, like every kind of career that I could, and people at different places in their life, those same questions. And then I asked a guy that I know is a billionaire, and I was having dinner with him one night, and I asked him, I said, you work all over, you're gone a lot. Like, do you miss your wife and your kids? And it's like, yeah. Said, do you worry about your kids? He's like, yeah, God, I worry about them a lot. They have this life of privilege, and I worry how that's gonna shape them. And I said, when you come home from work, like, does your wife make you do shit? Does she have like a to-do list? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, what the hell? And then I said to him, how are your parents? And I know his family. And he says, well, Dad's not doing very well, and I'm pretty worried about him. And then I said to him, I said, have you ever been dumped? He's like, well, I was married before. I'm like, well, I always assumed you broke up with her because you're like Batman to me, dude. Like, and he said, no. He said she broke up with me and we're eating steak. And I say to him, how did that feel? And he looks up at me and he says, how do you think it felt? My heart was broken. I'm like, thank you. Thank you. Like, that's awesome. Not that you got your heart broke, but you validated to me because you answered the questions the exact same way as the person that I talked to on the mountain that had nothing. Gets paid $12 a day to pack my shit up to the top of the mountain. And here's a guy who is a multi-billionaire. And they answered those questions. Emotionally, they responded the same when I asked about their kids, their wives, their parents, and love and heartache. Exactly the same. And for me, there was no doubt after that at an emotional level, all human beings are the same. We all feel the same emotions for different reasons, and they vary in depth, but we all feel the same emotion. So I no longer have to suffer from terminal uniqueness.
That's funny because even before you started talking, I kind of wanted to preface it by saying, your story is the everyman's story. And by hearing it, we can all relate. And that's what happened in that group. As soon as I told my story, well, everybody else said like, yeah, I've been through, I won't go into specifics for respect for myself and others involved, but like all of the things that you talk about, getting your heart broken, betrayal, hitting the bottom, making your own bed and lying in it, like we've all experienced it. So once I said that, they said, "Oh yeah, that happened to me." But it was nice too because some of the guys had stories of like, "Hey, here's what I did," and that gave me a lot of inspiration. And it's funny that you had to go to one of the most wicked mountains on planet Earth to find that out. And it's funny that you had to talk to a billionaire as far as type A males go is Mecca. Like that is like the perfect human being. Like it might as like you say, it might as well be Batman or Superman or something like that's, but they're so I mean, I've been fortunate to know a lot of really super successful people now as well. And I find that they're extremely ordinary when you talk to them. And unfortunately, they live in this world too where everybody treats them differently too because of their perceived success. But what I'm really wondering is like we live in this programming, and I want you to unpack for me what gave you hope long enough to think you'd be happy to fool you into going all those distances, climbing all those mountains, building those teams, becoming successful, having that home, having that, vision out the window. But the lie that we end up with in our midlife, and I think a lot of people can figure this out too in the farming community where there's a lot of wealth over time, like when you get all that stuff, it actually made you happy for a very short period of time, if at all. And then the danger is like you get to that point and you're like, now what the fuck do I actually do? Because that thing that I worked for the last 30 years to get didn't make me happy. Where now? Like you're literally at the top of the mountain looking around and going like, this is horrible because I don't know what thing I'm going to do next or climb next or conquer next to fill this empty hole. And you even talking about before we got started on the call, coming out of the company now, you're still doing it. You're still in that programming, Trevor.
Yeah, in many ways, right? And that's what we had talked about prior to. And so life is a journey, and what I really believe is we have an opportunity to turn our struggles into strengths. And so what I went through in the last few months, as I was leaving SurePoint, and SurePoint was a journey. I was there 23 years. As I said, we sold the company. In 2013, I became the CEO. I'm a tradesperson, and the company is in financial distress. I didn't even know how bad because I had no way to validate it because I knew very little about actual business. We got through some really hard times, brought emotion. So I took my moment on the bathroom floor when I found out that we were, a few months away from bankruptcy, high potential bankruptcy, put into forbearance, bank account locked, all money's taken out of the account, can't make payroll. This is 10 weeks after I accept the CEO role of a company that's big, and I don't even know what a CEO does. And then all of a sudden I learn about balance sheets and P&Ls and cash flow and working capital and bank covenants and banking agreements and how all of this stuff works and capitalization. Like I knew none of this, and I got a crash course on it because we were put into forbearance and we were basically told that the term that was going to be called in about 4 months. And so I went to the team and asked them for help. I went like full on vulnerable and went and said, hey, to the whole team, we're in trouble, and I want you all to know the truth so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. Like I understand if you want to leave because things are tough and they're going to get a lot worse before they get better. However, I've decided to stay, and I hope you all stay. And if you stay, I have no idea how we'll get through it. I just 100% know we will. And I promise you on the other side of this, we'll build a better culture than we ever had. And almost everyone stayed. And I brought our vendors in, and I talked to them one at a time. And I said to our vendors, like, we're in trouble. And this is what happened. The bank did this to our line because we broke some covenants. And I'm letting you know so you have a choice. We need your help. And if you help us, we'll get through this. And we're SurePoint. We always pay our bills, late, but we always pay them. And if you don't, I understand, but we probably won't make it. And then I went to our clients, to some of our clients, and said, hey, we're in a bit of a bind. Can you quick pay some stuff? Oh, and by the way, we need you to give us more work. So, and they helped, and we rebuilt SurePoint. I said, I want to prove that carrying is a competitive advantage in life and business, and certainly in our industry, which is predominantly oil and gas. And so I started talking about emotions, and I started to talk about caring and what caring really means. And it was a really tough thing to get our team, again, type A predominantly male leadership, to start to open up a little bit about how they were feeling about stuff. And when we hit the pandemic in 2018, I had an opportunity to buy the company back, and I bought it back. And we had gone from 4 million to 92 million to 40 million to 50 million to on our way to 60 million, 55-ish, and we buy the company back, and it's like the future's bright. I went to 15 people on the team in 2018 and said, hey, the company's going to be put up for sale, and I will go into this one more time with you all. All the other founders were gone. Said, I'll do it with you all. And everybody said, awesome, we want to do it. I said, but there's one caveat. You have to be open to us turning this into an employee-owned organization. And they all said yes. And the reason for that is because in 2008, when we sold the company, I didn't feel good about it. I was grateful, changed my life financially, farm kid that all of a sudden, has some cash in the bank. And it set my wife and I up to be comfortable. However, I said to my wife, I didn't celebrate it. As a matter of fact, the day we sold the company happened to be the same day that I had to either be here to sign the papers with the team, or I had to be in Mexico with one of my best friends to stand up with him at his wedding, and I chose to be there. So I signed a power of attorney over to our CEO at the time so he could sign all the paperwork for me. So I'm down in Mexico at this thing. I wake up the next day and I go to take $20 out of the bank account, and I'm like, holy shit, this thing went through. Like I have all this money, and I'm at an all inclusive, and my buddies make me spend like, I don't know, $2,000 on cigars at the time. But that was the celebration. I came back home and my wife said to me about a week later, she said, "You don't seem excited." And I said, "I feel like we missed something." 10 of our lives changed the day after that sale. 240 other people, they woke up the next day and nothing changed. The only thing they could hope for was that the new owners treated them at least as good as we did. And we still had partial ownership, so we stayed. But things changed. I don't think anybody really understood the impact of giving farm kids that kind of money. We go and buy cows and land and we go back farming. And so here we are. I said to her, if I ever had a chance to do it again, I would do it different. And all of a sudden we get an opportunity and buy the company back with 15 of the employees and some help from a private equity group and a private investor in Alberta. Bring the company back home. Everybody's excited. December 2018, we closed the deal, and then the pandemic hit. And we had an opportunity to really truly show that we care and to go all in on values. And we made a decision that almost bankrupted us, but ended up being the greatest thing we could have done. We made a decision to keep all of our team. And to do that, everybody had to sacrifice. And so I gave up. And there was a whole series of events that led to this. But for 7.5 months, I gave up 50% of my pay. Or I did for 9 months, and the entire team for 7.5 months gave up between 10% and 35% of their pay so that we could keep everybody and guarantee everybody a minimum paycheck. And that conversation, once I got the team together with 25 people and said, we can do it this way and maybe get through it, or we can do it this way and maybe get through it. And one ties back to our core values, we care, and there's no gun to anyone's head. Everybody has to be in though. And if you're not in, I get it, and we'll find a different way. But this might be the most meaningful thing any of us ever do in our careers. And this will solidify we care. And this is what caring is. And took half an hour for everybody to agree. And when you think about the context, these people were in their 30s. Many of them had remortgaged their houses to buy into SurePoint, and they're taking 10 to 35% pay cuts. The leadership group that had invested were the higher income earners, but they were giving up 20 to 35% of their pay, and their bills didn't go down. We barely got through that. Our revenue dropped to 30 million down coming out of the pandemic, just under. And we managed to scrape up a bit of money from the board, helped us raise a little bit of money to buy a competitor, a small competitor, and merge it in. And then it got out what we had done through the pandemic and how we had kept everybody and how we sacrificed together. And our business exploded. After merger, or after the acquisition and the merger, we went from 30 million to we ended the year at 46 million. The next year, we were $98 million. We grew organically that much. We hired 175 people at a time it was hard to find people. And we hired 125 of them in 9 months. We were onboarding people that had to onboard people, totally ran out of money again because we were profitable, but we had no working capital. Now we're back in a situation we were like in 2013. And I'm saying, no, this time vendors, it's different. Like we're actually making money. It's just tied up and chaos. And then the year after that, we did 125 million. And I resigned at the end of that year and took 1 year in a different position as president. And then I did a year part-time to help with some international opportunities we had. And then I resigned from SurePoint at the end of last year. But we proved that caring is definitely a competitive advantage in life and business and in our industry, and proved that I'm writing a book actually called Scale Like You Give a Shit. And it's the blueprint on what we did at SurePoint to scale our company without losing our soul.
I wondered how caring could be a competitive advantage, given that I would say, especially in, say, the Albertan oil field, I would suspect that weakness is a trait that you don't want to be shown displaying on the savannah for the reason you'll likely get eaten.
However, the bravest, most courageous thing I feel I've ever done in my life was to be vulnerable and open about what's truly going on in my life and how I'm feeling. And I tell people it didn't take it doesn't take away from my masculinity. I grew up on a farm. I rode horses. We had cattle. I've been bucked off. I've been kicked. I played hockey. I've climbed mountains. I've been beat up in fights lots of times. I've done all the guy stuff. And yet, Dan, sometimes my wife says things that hurts my feelings and makes me feel sad. Like that's a reality. I used to pretend it didn't. So I thought there was three emotions: happy, sad, and mad, and matter. Four. Like that was it. And I was usually like kind of happy, I thought, or mad or matter, and sometimes sad. And so when I started to talk about this stuff and like started to talk about the fact that I was somebody, who arguably had some success in life in some areas of my life. Um, and I'm like, hey, but at that time, it was the worst time of my life, not financially, but emotionally and mentally. It was the biggest struggle. And you talked about it earlier. And so what had happened was, and I believe this now, kind of reverse engineering it, was I believed when I hit that point, I would finally be happy. And the reality is, it was not about happiness. It was about feeling like I was enough. And I never felt like I was enough. And so when I went into Dr. Gons, so I'll go back, I usually tell this part, this story. So Dr. Gons has me come to multiple sessions. And one day I sit down with him. Then I'd been to 10 or 12 sessions, getting to know him well. And one day I walk into his office, I sit down, and all he says to me, he says, "Hey, Trev, how are you feeling?" And I responded like this. I said, "How am I feeling?" I said, "I have felt less than and insecure and inferior my entire life." I said, "I'm afraid of absolutely everything. I'm afraid of success and I'm afraid of failure." And I said, most of my life I felt sad for some reason, and worse, when I'm not sad, I'm numb. And I said, and the worst of all is I'm lonely all the time. I'm lonely when I'm alone. I'm lonelier when I'm with my friends, and I'm loneliest when I'm with my family. And I don't know what the hell is wrong with me. And I said it, and I was like, that thing you say to your spouse where you're like, shit, here's this guy I look up to and I put on a pedestal, and I'm going in and I'm being honest, and I was like, I don't know why I said that. And I'm trying to suck it back. And I thought he's going to say, you need to be more grateful, and you need to be more positive, and you need to look at all the good things you have in your life. And my brain is going through that, and how I'm going to respond to that. And instead, he looked me in the eye, and he kind of leaned in, and he said, "Oh man, I get it. I totally get it." And he said, "Thank you so much for being honest with me. I know how hard it is to be that vulnerable." Um, and that day changed my life. I left there feeling different than I'd felt my entire life. Like the weight of the world had coming off. And I can't remember. There's two times in my life I can tell you every single detail about a specific moment. That conversation where I was sitting, the color of his couch, and that was 20, like that's been a long time ago. And the way he looked at me, how he was sitting, the chair he was in, the color of his office, everything, and my moment on the bathroom floor. I lived in that condo for 10 weeks. I can tell you every speck on the tile of that floor, every speck in the backsplash on the wall over the sink, the color of the sink. I could pull up in 1 second every detail about that bathroom. And that was many, many years ago, 2011. And so those are two moments that were defining in my life and changed my life. And I was like, huh, how many other people are feeling the way I'm feeling and so afraid to say anything because it shows weakness? And when I first talked about this, that was the scariest thing I ever did. And you mentioned the poetry book. When I published that poetry book, I was like, I was petrified. I actually hired a company to help me publish it, and I paid them. And then a year later, they reached out to me, and they're like, the guy who signed me up, he's like, "How'd the launch go?" I'm like, "Oh, I didn't do anything with it." He's like, "You paid us." I'm like, "Yeah, I changed my mind." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, I'm busy." He's like, "So you had somebody call me to be like, I read your poems and these need to get out there." And I didn't tell a single soul. This is kind of funny. I'm in the airport at Calgary just before Christmas, quite a few years ago, after I'd written the book. And I'm working through the process with Tellwell Publishing, and they were awesome. And I'm scrolling back through emails, and I'm like, oh, last week or 8 days ago, I got this email from Tellwell that I didn't open. And I open it up, and it says, "We want to congratulate you on the launch of your book. It's on Amazon. And I'm like, holy shit. Like it launched, and I didn't even tell anybody. I hadn't told my wife, I hadn't told my parents, I hadn't told anybody. So I have a claim to fame. I sent the link to everybody in my family and some friends, and I'm like, oh, by the way, I kind of forgot to mention I wrote a book and I published it. And And so I got for 1 hour or 2 hours, I was number one on Amazon
Oh
for in
man.
a few categories, and people are like, "That's awesome." I'm like, "Yeah, but I think my mom bought like 20 copies in like 8 minutes, so I just spiked the thing." But yeah,
Why
that was one of the
why
scariest things I ever did in my
why
life.
poetry instead of a business book? I would think you'd write a business book.
So I'm writing a business book now, but I used poetry as a way to release my emotions, and poems just come to me like the Someday to Today poem, and that turned into a monster of its own, where we challenged companies to go, and we challenged human beings to change their someday to today. And I wrote that after an experience with one of my best friends and a coworker, where he collapsed in front of me at Princess Island Park in Calgary when we went to go for a walk there. And super healthy guy, like very healthy, complained of a headache, never been sick in his life, I don't think. And he dropped in front of me and stopped breathing. And I gave him CPR, rolled him over and gave him CPR. And that was a life-changing moment. And then a few weeks after that, my mentor, got a guy who got me into the trades, actually family friend. His son called and said that his name was Brian. Said Brian's in the hospital, and as soon as his brother gets here, we're gonna unplug him. He was in intensive care, 62 years old, financially so well off, and 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 died. He'd retired. He got retired years earlier. He retired in January of that year, and he died in May. And he wanted to work because he bought some fancy Chevy, old 1960 something. I don't know cars. But he had this car that he bought in the US, and he was fully restoring it. And he wanted to work because he didn't want to pull any money out of his investments to pay for this car. The car showed up on a trailer in BC where he lived. And he sat in it and started it, but he didn't take it off the trailer because he was sending it to get rims and tires on it. And he died before it got out of that shop. And at his funeral, his brother-in-law was given a eulogy. And at the end of the eulogy, he said, Brian and I were going to go and do all these things someday, both of them very financially comfortable. We're going to go to all these golf courses around North America. We're going to go to all these hockey arenas and NHL games. We're going to go on cruises with our wives, and we're never going to get to. I hope you leave here and you change your someday to today. And I wrote the next morning, I wrote the someday to today poem. It just came to me. And so my poems just come. I can't actually sit and write a poem, but I'll wake up at 2 in the morning if I emotionally connect with something, and I write a poem. And so the poem that I shared when I spoke at Corliss's conference, and kind of what leads into everything, at the time in my life where things were really dark and I was acting like they weren't, is called I Lie Awake in Darkness. And I'll see if I can remember it. I lie awake in darkness, but there's bright light all around me. My vision's nearly perfect, yet I can clearly see. My mind's not calm and steady. It races on and on. Sometimes I think that it won't stop till my sanity is gone. The noise that echoes in my ears but hasn't any sound just adds to my confusion as my world goes round and round. I pray that there's a heaven, though sometimes it's hard to tell. There are times in my life when I know that there's a hell. These are moments when there's agony in every single breath. These are moments I'm afraid of life, but more afraid of death. And that's how I felt for much of my life. So,
I think a lot of people could relate to that. And what I was thinking about when we were going through our leadership class was emotions aside, you know, this is the what you and Corliss were offering was one of the most valuable technologies on planet Earth. And we're awash in technologies. We're going to get there. We're going to talk about, I got to pick your brain about AI once we get through all this.
okay, go for
So I
how do
think
you
it's going to be
feel?
like a
I want
two,
to talk
yeah,
about
it's going to
AI.
be a
That's what
two-part series here because I think I'm going to break out part two is where we talk about AI and stuff. But I think the most valuable technology is this technology around the mind because a lot of people are living in this and it's a prison of our own device that you cannot escape. And it's something that burrows into your subconscious. And, I'm feeling so free in 2026, and you and Corliss are a huge part of that. And really like leaning into what I'm love doing, full time has been like there's external circumstances, and I wish I'd been able to overcome all of that in the past. But like looking back, there was things that bothered me. I think you can relate, like whatever it was, whether it was financial stress or some situation or somebody got on my nerve, like and it just you couldn't stop thinking about it. You couldn't control how you thought about it. And just like Corliss talked about at the Convergence Conference, your thoughts lead to your actions, lead to your outcomes. And guess what? If the whole food chain is shitty, you're going to have terrible thoughts, terrible actions, and terrible
It,
outcomes. And we're not in those moments. We don't have enough. There's not enough bandwidth left outside just what you wrote that poem about to like look in and say, wow, that's not going for you. Good for you. Maybe you should try something else, because all of our, like, it consumes so much bandwidth. It's like an internet connection. Like, it's all, our lives are pixelated because the whole information stream is rotten at
so
the
this
core.
is something that I didn't know. Like, I mean, I learned this stuff over time. I'm blessed because I ended up in a position where I wanted to end my life and didn't. And so I was forced. Like this was not a. I woke up one day and I wasn't one of those people who was like, hey, I just want to become more self-aware. And at a time in my life when things were kind of rough, I was forced down a path that was change my life or die. And that was the reality. But when I realized, and I didn't know this, that my thoughts control my feelings and my feelings control my actions, that it actually starts in my mind and that I have control of that. And if I don't want to suffer for a long period of time, I can change the station. Um, Somebody said at a conference I was at one time, and it was so profound and it was simple but profound. And she said, somebody told me one time that I'm listening to a song on a radio station and it's making my sad. I can change it. And I was like, how many times? And she was talking about this, our thought patterns, right? How many times have I stayed on the same radio station over and over and over again, feeling sad? Like or angry or like if you were listening to a song on a radio and it was making you mad and you wouldn't leave it on repeat for 7 days.
It's
Yet
true.
yet the radio station in our mind, when I realized that, it wasn't a wake up one day and be like, oh, now I know I'm never going to do it. It was like, now I'm aware. I want to learn how to to reframe it and how to change it. And so we were talking at the beginning. I just went through a really tough time here in the last few months, overtired, overstretched, some imposter syndrome, some fair financial insecurity that's unfounded, like a bunch of stuff. And I suffered for a while, and I'm happy to share that and openly share that. However, I didn't go as far down, and wasn't for as long, because what I did was wake up one day and realize I am not a victim of my circumstances, and I have all of these things going on in my mind that aren't true. And I went and spoke to somebody and shared it, a mentor, and then was like, hey, I know what to do. Change my thinking, get back to doing things that are healthy for me, walk in the mornings, drink more water, have breakfast. All those things help better than laying in the dark in the basement for 4 hours in the morning before I kind of forced myself. But I had to learn this stuff then. And once I always say the greatest thing, somebody told me one time, I taught this in the class too, but about the 3 A's. And somebody said to me, this life coach said to me years ago, he's like, Trev, um, if you're unaware of something, you can't change it. So when you become aware of it, aware that you were unaware, don't beat yourself up. You were unaware. There was nothing you could do about it. So the greatest thing about being unaware is you're unaware. However, once you're aware, you can never again become unaware. And I was like, huh. And he said there's 3 A's that all change: awareness, acceptance, and action. And he said most people think that awareness is the hardest part of the change. I was unaware that I kept hurting somebody's feelings. And now that I'm aware, I would make sense that you would quit hurting somebody's feelings. But the hardest part is acceptance. And it's the hardest part of any change. And it was like, I had to learn once I became very aware of what the real challenges in my life were, and and I had to accept that I was a big part of all of that. And that's when the work happened. And I think I used this analogy because he was like awareness, acceptance, action. And he said, Trev, I'll put it to you this way, because I wasn't totally getting it. And he said, if you're in Disneyland with your family and you're on the log ride and you have a bungalow, you live in Edmonton, and your house is flooding, you're on the log ride, but nobody calls to tell you that your house is flooding. Are you worried about your house flooding? I'm like, no. How are you feeling while you're on the log ride while your house is flooding if you don't know it's flooding? I'm like, I love the log ride. I love Disneyland. I'm feeling awesome. He goes, exactly. Now you fly home the next day, you pack all your bags in the middle of the night, and you step into the main floor of your house, and there's water up to your ankles. He said, now at the very minimum, you're aware that there's water in your house. And he said, so now you cannot become unaware that there's water in your house. He said, however, you have an opportunity to accept it or not. He said, you can either accept that you have a problem, that there was a break in the water line in your house, and you can get somebody in, suck all the water out. You can rebuild the foundation so it's better, never rebuild your basement. And I'm like, yeah. He said, or you can tell yourself how awesome it is that you now have an indoor swimming pool, and you can buy a dinghy and a six pack, and you can float around in your basement until the foundation crumbles and the roof falls in on your head. And I laughed, and he said, that's how you're living your life. You're very aware of the problem. You just have to accept who's responsible for fixing it. And either way, there's an action. And one is the foundation's going to crumble and the roof's going to fall on my head. And the other is I can pump out the water and get somebody in to help me fix it. And I eventually chose the latter, thankfully.
That recalls so many things that we talked about in the course and on the radio thing. I was just thinking about that, how that's a torture device by some of the bad guys on planet Earth throughout history, is play music at high volumes over and over, or speeches or something, for people that are imprisoned and want to torture them. So why do we do that to ourselves? But so many things you set up there really brought back some of the construct around what we talked about in the course. And something that resonated there was, and I realized in that moment too, when you put it out on paper for me, of course there's XYZ event, but 80% of the outcome is actually not going to be the event. It's going to be how you respond to it. And so
100%.
we have to prepare. And that was one of the last things that we talked about in this, leadership technology course, I would call it, was what do you do to maintain yourself? And it's such stupid, simple thing. You don't want to hear it. You don't want to talk about it because it's not that exciting, but the sleep, the water, the nutrition, the sobriety, like, it's just almost like, is that it? Like, can't you give me something better? Like, is there a peptide, or can I, is there something else more technologically advanced than drinking lots of water and getting some sleep? But that's where, if you get into the right space, then you can control your response. Then you don't create all these crappy outcomes for yourself to be dealing with on top of everything that you got going on, because there's hardly anything that's an emergency by which, like, our ancient physiologically fight or flight adept system is trying to prepare us for. There's no, I might have like a marketing emergency, Trevor, like, oh, I gotta get you over that brief. Did I not get you that brief over there? You got the brief now? You're good. You're good. You've got the brief. You looked at the brief. How do you feel about the brief? When are you sending the brief back to me for approval? Okay. Let's get WhatsApp, Slack, blah, 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 Trello, Zoom, blah, 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 blah. Zapier. We need Zapier integration. Like this. It's like, what? Another $100 US a month. I can't afford that. It's just like, and you're in this like marketing world, and you're like, there's no saber-tooth tiger. It's
Exactly.
It's a Zapier integration. But in the modern, like, we're not designed, like, God didn't mold us into like, one day you'll have to take care of the Zapier integration and you need to be a man about it. It's just like, no, you're designed to, take down a water buffalo with your buddies and then run away from the tiger, or, kill the tiger with
It's
your spoon. And now we're like, what's a Zapier? Oh, it's terrible. It's a big decision. We have to have a Slack huddle about the Zapier integration.
That's right.
And there's lots of farming equivalents. But yeah, I mean, what if we can reprogram? And to your point about being in the dinghy in the basement, oh, there's just so many good things you shared there. What if, like, I've had situations where I was like, what if I actually love that? And for a brief moment I did, and I felt totally different. It was the same damn situation. What if I felt totally different about those people? What if I felt totally different about that situation? And I actually took joy in being crapped on in some way that I, formerly didn't, but now I love it. What if? And it's just like, then you're the one that's freed because they're not feeling it. Now they're feeling it about something else. Okay, to be fair. They're not exempt from that feeling, but they might not even be thinking about you, and you're suffering about them, and they're not even, on the radar.
It, it's
So,
it's it's the funniest thing, and maybe it's not funny, but ironic maybe is a better word. I had to realize, or I came to realize, I didn't have to do anything, but I came to realize that other people don't think of me nearly as often as I think of me. Like I'm actually not like everybody doesn't wake up that I know and get up and grab a coffee in the morning and think of Trevor Muir and all the good things I've did or bad things I've did.
right.
Because you know what they're doing? They're getting up in the morning and they're going like, oh man, I'm feeling anxious or I'm excited because I got this thing with my kid or I'm sad or and we are inherently selfish as human beings, and I don't say that. I think that we're selfish in the wrong ways often. As I promoted during the course, I think that more human beings need to learn to be selfishly selfless. And I think that's a missing piece. Where selflessness is a badge of honor in our society. However, we're so inherently selfish. And I have a mentor who says, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. And that summed me up entirely, like entirely for most of my life. And the reality is most people don't actually give a shit. Like you have an interaction. How many times somebody's cut you off in traffic and you spend like 4 hours just angry about this person that you never saw before, that cut you off in the morning, or maybe it's an hour, or maybe it's 30 or 40 minutes, and they're not thinking about you. Like they're thinking about something else that has nothing to do with you. But I have obsessed about that stuff. And when I learned again that everything started in my own mind and I had control over that, I'm a big wuss to emotional pain, like now, like a really big wuss. I believe, to your point, there was a time in my life it was just so normal and it was so comfortable, and I would naturally gravitate back to that because even though it felt shitty, it was my comfort zone. Now I'm like, oh, I often let things go quickly and change the program, not for anybody else at all. It's because I don't like feeling that way anymore. I don't want to feel anxiety and stress. I don't want to feel sad and angry and resentful and any of those things. And so I can choose to let it go. And I'm like, I'm not doing it for the other person at all. I'll apologize and genuinely apologize now for because I care about humans, but I am not most of the things I do. It's like I'm doing it to feel good because I want to feel good.
Mm.
So
So funny, for context, people do think about you, but only in the context of how it applies to them and
right.
the time it takes to figure out where do you fit in according to their survival and their pride and their get it done and the things that they have to worry about. And
So
that's the only
yeah.
degree to which. Is that
Yeah,
fair?
and so I mean, we think about each other as teams, as family, as friends. There's context around it, but nobody, unless they're upset with me, or they're really, really, really happy with me about something, is thinking about me as often as I'm thinking about me. Like generally, even my mom and dad love me. I guarantee they don't wake up in the morning and think, I wonder how Trevor's doing, and spend the entire day in their head thinking about
Right.
me. Like it's just not how we're wired. And so that helped me a lot to recognize that those things, those times in my life where I did something that I was embarrassed of or ashamed of, or most people didn't even remember after a few minutes. Like, it was a I was a I was a topic of conversation for a while until something else came up. But I spent years worrying about things that I said to somebody when I was 21 years old. And I'd be in my head and I'd be like, oh my God, I should never see that person again because I said this thing at this party and run into him like 18 years later and kind of like, hey, by the way, kind of changed my life and I said this thing and they were like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally resonate with you on that, and I want to cover a few more of these points around, this area of conversation, and then I want to stick a pin in it and I want to pop the clutch on like a different direction. I think it's
Yeah,
two parts.
yeah.
Um, but before we finish up on this, like one of the first things that you said that very first day, and when you talked about the doctor saying like I get it, That's what happened for me in that leadership course too, where everybody that we went around the room with said, Dan, I get it. I get, and this happened to me. And some of them had these stories of, here's how I built back up slowly, and it took me time, but I did it, and I did it my way. And actually getting past some of the people that you might have held grudges against, or maybe you thought about them a lot as though they were thinking about you in the same way. There's this energetic connection, but you did share this technology. It was first, I thought, and it was fundamental. And the course was, and you and Corliss had this little like twinsies language that I was like, hey, what are they talking about? I had to lean in here because they're like talking about manifestation, and I know a lot of people might think it's voodoo or woo woo, but how we think produces this world. And one of the things that I first learned from Corliss was to build this vision, and not only just a vision, but a vision board. And I'm a very visual person. And I built this vision board on corkboard in Canva that I've have it like in my journal that I use a PDF. And there's some things on there, bro. They are for real. They're alive in my life, and they're happening because I saw them. And when the goodness is happening to me, I can believe better. Like, hey, this is part of what I saw. This is part of what I was moving towards. And so I was so like, let me behind the curtain on this manifestation thing because I want to learn it. But you talked about talking to yourself in the mirror and having to change your mind. And I just want to share a quick story about a friend of mine who lost his daughter to who took her own life. And he said, I had to wake up every day for however long and literally program his mind from not choosing what he had lost. Because if he focused on what he had lost, he probably wouldn't have been able to move ahead. He probably, versus if he focused what he had with the time that he had with his daughter.
Wow.
Can you imagine that, waking up every day, having to program your brain for
Yeah.
hours to beat the darkness, to say, like, no, I'm not going to look over here where there's just the loss and just what I'm missing and just the way I wish it wasn't. I'm going to look over here. And that was the most manly thing I ever heard because, you know, we as men, I think we can we're programmed to maybe grab a weapon or whatever in a rage and go, come over the crest of the hill and conquer the enemy. Like, probably in modern life, we don't get enough of that because it's kind of what we're built for. But to master that in your mind and have to overcome that mentally every day to look at the bright side of something that is unfathomable for a father. And when you're on that bathroom floor, you picked yourself up, you started looking in the mirror, and you said things that changed your life. And you have a challenge for people. If they could do this for 30 days, 5 times a day, you promised people, and there were people in that room that were back for the second time in the course that said, I did this, I've done this, I'm still working with Trevor. It's working. I'm like, yay, I'm in the right place, man. This is going to be good. So what is that?
Yeah. And so I learned this, and I got revalidated at Corliss conference actually,
Mm.
and by Jack Canfield, but it was something that I'd working on prior to for a long time. And as soon as you say I am, most of us are like, I want to be, or I will be, I will be wealthy, I will be healthy, I will have this awesome relationship, I will be. As soon as you say I am, it changes in your brain. And I don't understand exactly why, but it does. And as soon as you believe, as soon as you can, if you can ever get to a place where you think something and you feel the emotion of having it, anything, you end up getting it. And that's how manifestation, the real power comes from. But it starts with affirmations. And so oftentimes in our life, when negative things happen or we get into these kind of negative emotional contexts, or you get into this thing, if I wake up every day and say my life sucks, over and over and over again, my life sucks, and it just does. But the same thing happens when we talk about positive things in our life or the things that we want. And one of the things that I started, and I have shared this freely on all my social media platforms, and I've shared it with so many people in just one-on-ones as well, and said, if you want to change your life, do this one thing for 30 days and it will change your life. And it's so simple. And usually, especially with men, I get like that. Oh, come on. I'm like, well, try it. If it's that easy, try it. And if you say these three things, I am enough, I deserve abundance, I love you, Trevor. Don't say Trevor, say your name. If you say that 5 times a day in the mirror for 30 days in a row, your life will change. And actually, the thing about manifesting is you have to say you have to, I'm so happy and grateful. You start with that. I'm so happy and grateful that, and then you say the thing that, I have a loving relationship with, a beautiful person who aligns with me perfectly, by this date. If you can be specific with it, whatever it is that you're manifesting, if you say it for 30 days in a row, it happens, it comes. And I went back, I'd heard it from Jack Canfield actually, and then I went back and because I was like, I don't know. And I remember the first time I started actually saying these manifestations, and I'm walking. So that year I walked 1 kilometer every single morning outside for 365 days in a row. And I would say it. And I'm looking at 6 a.m. and there's not that many people around me, if any. And I'm saying this stuff, and then I'm looking around thinking, I hope people don't think I'm weird. This is corny, this is crazy, this is insane. And then I was like, wait a minute. Here's a guy who's had this extreme accomplishments in life, extreme success, has a house beside Oprah, and he's standing on a stage saying, if you do this, I'm giving you my 2-week master class in 20 minutes. Write this stuff down. If you do this, your mind will get stronger. You'll get stuff. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. And then I thought, well, what if I go to a fitness instructor and they tell me, come into the gym every day and do 20 bicep curls every single day for 30 days and you'll be stronger? I'm like, I wouldn't even question it. But here I was. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going all in on this. Also realized something else during that time. What is keeping me from believing in it? Like, why would I doubt it? And it was like, well, in a feeling of not believing I deserve it was one of it. Limited beliefs. So from that, I unpacked a bunch of stuff. Then I started saying it. Then I started saying the manifestations, and then I actually researched it, and it went back to the U.S. military, or the astronaut program actually had actually found this accidentally, that if you do something for 30 days in a row, it flips your brain. And so he said you have to do it for 30 days, minimum of 30 days. And if you do it for 29 days, you have to start all over again. And then people are like, oh, I'm too busy, or I forget. I'm like, write it in lipstick on your mirror in your bathroom. And if you can't say, I've had people say, I'm just too busy. I've had mothers say, oh, I got to get up with my kids. I'm like, okay, I am enough. I deserve abundance. I love you, Trevor. I am enough. I deserve abundance. I love you, Trevor. I am enough. I deserve abundance. I love you, Trevor. I am enough. I deserve abundance. I love you, Trevor. I am enough. I deserve abundance. I love you, Trevor. I'm like, if you don't have that much time, like that was what, 18 seconds, then
Yeah.
your life is fucked. Like you have to change a
Yeah.
lot. And I often refer to, I think it was Buddha who said, or the Dalai Lama, pardon me,
Yeah. Yeah.
who said that quote, everybody should meditate for 5 minutes a day, unless you don't have time. And then you should meditate for an hour.
I hoped you were going to drop that. And I was just thinking of that quote, and then I realized you said that. And you know what? I got to say, too, there's another element. We're going to get to it. But in today's world, technology has multiplied the amount of options, information, communications. I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, I'm more exhausted than ever before. And I think we need to close our eyes and take a moment and work on that. And I love that you made that analogy, and it reminded me that I need to keep doing those reps. And we do. We fall off the cracker. We don't go to the gym, and our muscles atrophy. And here's my thingamajigger. I made like an AI image of myself.
Oh my God,
Mm.
that's so cool. Okay, you have to show me how to do that. I love it.
Yeah. So I made an AI image of myself looking in the mirror, and yeah, I
That
put
is so cool.
you are enough. You deserve abundance, and I love you, Dan. So that's on my lock screen. And of course, I haven't been doing it as much as I should. It's a great reminder, but I mean, these things. You could go. I love that you go deep on these things too, Trevor, because it's important. We could say this stuff is voodoo, but what do we know about the world? I mean, there's more spaces between, atoms than, by comparison, the stars. Like, it's so crazy what we're learning about the world today. And it's all, to me, frequency and vibration, and whether it's figuratively or literally, like what you put out in the world there and what you get back. You can call it what you want, but I totally believe there's a strong spiritual element in the world. And this is where our faith comes into it. And I just believe that it's all connected. And there's, I feel like I'm riding the wave of fortune now. And I talked about it, and I learned about the wave of fortune, Trevor, when my whole world came crashing down when I was in Thailand, and I finally put that 10-year journey to bed with my former business. And I knew it was, finally put a bullet in it, as we talk about, taking a horse behind the barn on the farm. Everybody relates to that. And we finally took the horse behind the barn and put a bullet in it. And I was kind of happy I didn't have to ride that, what to me at the time was a donkey. But I mean, it was hard to let go of that farm animal.
So I'm not
But,
laughing at your misfortune.
I'm like, I wanted to ride this donkey up the mountain until his very last breath or whatever, even though it was horrible and stinky and nobody wanted me to ride the donkey anymore and tell me to get off the donkey. But there I was in Thailand, and there wasn't much to do when I got finally word of the whole situation, but to go out to the beach. And it's for a Saskatchewan farm boy to be sitting on the edge of the ocean there. It's really visceral, right? Like it's such an experience. And I quickly noticed like these waves are so powerful at the edge. And you're trying to look cool or kind of look good on your own. And you're just walking around the beach like, oh yeah, I'm at the beach now. And then, but these waves, like you're almost kind of getting knocked over and it's a little bit awkward. And your swimming trunks, you kind of got to hold on to them. And it's not, it's not that great of a place to be. But if you're right at the edge of the shore where the waves break, it's impossible. It really is impossible. But if you go out far enough into the ocean, you're going to be bobbing up and down like an apple. And before there's any froth or the waves break and your head's just kind of poking out and you're floating effortlessly. And that's where I was reminded of this Russian quantum physicist turned book writer, Vadim Zeland, in his book series called Transurfing, where he talked about the wave of fortune, where really when we try and hold on to things too tightly, our grip actually is counterproductive. We have to learn to let go. And it's not that we don't take care, and it's not that we don't do our best, and it's not that we don't pay attention, but when we give things too much importance, he talks about reducing importance. It really makes us act and respond in ways that we get poor results. And then made me think a lot about being gratitude. Like when I started getting a little bit of wins in the new year, it made such a big difference. And you guys heard my stories about like, hey, I had this win or I had that win or I'm on the comeback or I'm rebuilding. And it was just, counting those little wins and just having faith like that could turn into more. And when you start winning, the momentum is kind of crazy. Like it's like a team going for the championship. Like once you start scoring goals and start winning, it's like this is a like you even forget. Like if you haven't been on a winning team for a while, you're like, I didn't even know what that meant. Like, and then the third thing I thought was, well, positioning versus force, because yeah, it takes a lot of force to stand on the edge of the ocean and try and maintain my footing and look cool for the girls. But if I'm far enough out in the ocean, not too far, I can't, I'm going to drown if I go out too far. As a Saskatchewan farm boy, I get caught up in the currents and I'll be in the newspaper. But positioning versus force. So if I get properly positioned and I have gratitude and I'm taking care, but I'm not approaching things with too much importance, I'm going to ride the wave of fortune. That's what I learned in the waves of Thailand. And that's what the course kind of cemented for me. And I feel like ever since then I've been winning and it feels great and it's effortless. It's effortless.
You talked about something I did when I walked for a full year. I did 1 kilometer a day outside every morning, and it was ugly sometimes. It was cold and shitty, but I committed to it. And then I started to do these walk and talks. And one of the things I would talk about lots is gratitude. And I would record it and I'd share it.
Oh,
And it
wow.
was really just kind of what was going through my brain on the walk. So I'd start the walk, I'd do part of it, and then I would take 1 or 2 minutes at the end just to share what I had thought about while I was on the walk. And one of the things was I was big into like what what makes what do successful people do? And I'm not just talking about financial success, but the people who just have this level of success in all areas of their life, that's different. And the number one thing is gratitude. And if anybody follows Vishal Makiani or some of those thought leaders or Tony Robbins, and you actually go back, there's science that backs all of this stuff as well. But the greatest brain hack is gratitude. And it's so hard to be grateful for anything in your life when things seem shitty. Like it's so hard. But the minute that you're grateful for something in your life, you actually reprogram your brain again. It is the number one brain hack. It's like reprogramming the whole computer just by starting with that. And there's tons of research done when somebody is in a true state of gratitude. No matter what is going on in their life, more good things happen. But it changes it at a cellular level, actually, in your body. And I don't understand it. I can't explain it well enough, and I'll butcher it if I try to. But it actually changes the cells in your body to react differently And so it's like, I want to be wealthy. I want to have an awesome relationship. It's like, I am healthy. I shared this with you. One of my daily affirmations is I am healthy. I am wealthy. I am confident. I'm strong. I am kind. I am wise. I'm successful. I am loved. And I say that every day. And I say three or four or five times because I am. And what that started to do was when I'm on my walk, I'm like, I am healthy. Holy shit, I am healthy. You know what? I'm on a walk. I can walk a kilometer every single day. Like, I'm damn grateful. Like, there are people I know that can't. I am wealthy. I am love. I am, all of the things that I'd say I want to be or I will be, I changed it to I am. And then I started to be grateful for it. And it changed everything in my life again. It was like, and then when I found the data on it, and there's a ton on Mind Valley about this specifically. And they put sensors on his brain and they put Vashon into these different um, simulators to see. And they said the number one difference between people who are super successful and have a fully enriched life and the ones who are super successful in one area financially and the ones that aren't was gratitude. And it is the biggest superpower. It's more powerful than love.
Huh. Well, Andy Frisella, 75 Hard, talks about hard work plus gratitude. It's truly, I guess, the happiness that, I think is more fruitful than maybe the happiness that everybody aspires to. And if you've read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules, there's a story about lobsters in there, of which we were, somewhere along the family tree descended, and they're using some of the same drugs that we do, like serotonin and oxytocin and different things to guide their activities. And apparently, lobsters are quite smart.
I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do this fighting dance for mating rights to the territory, and it's a dance, and then they might rip off a claw, and then they might kill each other. But ultimately, if one lobster, just long story short, if one lobster dominates the other lobster, the winner is full of serotonin. Its posture is good. It's going around the bottom of the ocean there, like, oh yeah, he's getting all the ladies. He's having the food buffet. He's kind of walking around with his claws like, king of the castle there or whatever. And the loser lobster, their brains literally reconfigure into a lesser state, and they become the true bottom feeders where they're walking around. A slow, hard death sort of ensues because they're not, and if they try and rise up again, they may get crushed and so on and so forth. But I believe that's where things kind of evolve from is that there's still these primitive chemicals in our body that we share with the rest of nature. And there's a level, I believe this is crazy, but I believe there's a level of consciousness in all these animals to varying degrees. And so I don't believe we're that separated from our emotional and physiological responses, but we had this crazy layer of the mind that dreams and talks all the time and everything on top of this ancient thing. Like, hey, you got to run for the hills at pretty much like in between procreating,
Yeah.
take a break and run from the hills from the danger, like it's like two states, like fighting or fucking or whatever. Like it's all kind of primitive. And I think it's our job to take inventory and use this technology to overcome it. And what if you could reprogram the way you think about things and everything changes in advance of the changes? And that's how I feel about everything that's happened. I mean, some of the stuff in my personal life, I'm like, damn, hizzle jizzle. Like, wow, I mean, that worked out really good. And it kind of gets me excited because what if we could and it was that easy and it's actually kind of fun. It's not that hard. It's not that hard, but it's not that easy. It's like working out, but the more you do it, like when you go to the gym and you've been my fitness pal guy and you've been the gym guy and stuff like that to varying degrees, like
Yeah.
how it is, the more you do it, the better it is, the easier it
Yeah.
is. Like you go to the gym every day, on the 130th day, you're like, this is so easy, I feel guilty, and it's so
Yeah.
good, I can never be without this. But if you don't go to the gym, it's the hardest thing to do in your life.
It- and a great example. Um, One of the things that happened, I had a small surgery on December 9th, and I had a couple weeks where I was told, like, don't do anything really, like just take it easy and small walks and stuff. And so from that day, I had done 3 months of 5K a day. So for 90 days, I did 5K a day. And then I was going, and I've always been, well, not always, but for the last decade, I've been pretty active. And then I took 2 weeks off and I didn't get back until last week, gained 12 pounds and getting up every day to walk 1 kilometer, which to me was the easiest thing in the world. It was just, it was like, it was so easy. I couldn't talk myself out of it. I had to start with, okay, I'm going to walk 5 minutes because I couldn't even get my ass out of the house to start again, knowing how good it was for me and knowing how much better I felt and knowing how much worse I feel because for 3 months, just over 3 months, I didn't do anything really exercise related. And to restart, even though I know how beneficial it is for me, it was so hard. I had to make a contract. We talked about this in the class, but I had to remake a contract that was actually after our conversation in the class where I was like, 1 kilometer a day is too much for me to commit to right now. Like I
Right.
can talk myself out of it, but 5 minutes, I can't talk myself out of going for a 5 minute walk. And since that day, there's only been one day that I've only done the 5 minute walk. I've always walked a K or a kilometer and a half. This morning, I was like, I'm kind of in a hurry and I got lots to do. So I'm only going to walk a kilometer. And I ended up walking 2.25 kilometers and I didn't have time. I told myself, I do not have time. I barely have time for a 1 kilometer walk. And then I did 2.25 kilometers. And we talked about that when my goal was one block or 10 squats. I went up to walk one block one Sunday. I'm like, I'm tired. I'm not going to do it. I'm getting my one block out. And I walked over 10K that day.
Oh, really?
The hardest, somebody told me the hardest squat you'll ever do is the one getting off the couch. And I'm like, that is
You're an
so.
extreme guy though. And everything, like every time we start talking about something, you just blow my mind with this and that, like, and you're such a humble, open, fun guy. But then you're like, yeah, I built this company and blah, 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 120 million bucks later. And oh, yeah, what did we start talking about the other day? We were talking about cold plunges or something. Like, oh, yeah, no, I got to the point where I could run for my underwear up a mountain like for 3 days. And I was like, you bastard.
I did Wim Hof. Oh, I did a free
Well, tell
course.
us about that. Like,
Oh my
that's
God, Wim
crazy.
Hof was awesome. So my buddy Marty is the one who was like, "Hey, have you checked the Wim Hof?" So we started looking. He signed up for the course. I'm going to do this too. And so for 90 days, I followed Wim Hof. So you do this breathing. I got to the end where I could hold my breath for just over 3 minutes. I didn't really like it, but I was like, so you start and you go over a 30 days, I think it was. You start and you do a cold shower and you start with 1 minute out of 10 minutes, and then you go 2 minutes. And so the first day I do 1 minute, and the second day I do 1 minute. And then I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to 10 minutes. So day three, I'm like ice cold shower, 10 minutes. And for 88 more days or 87 more days, I did that every single day. It was miserable. Like it was terrible. My bones would hurt. But I did it. But I was like, hey, you know what? I'm getting so that I can actually be out in the cold. And I've always been able to take cold because I worked in it lots. And I was like, I'm going to go out. And it was minus 35 or minus 40. And I'm like, I'm going to go and shovel the drive pad and the entire block by hand in my running shoes and my jeans and a t-shirt. And I had to put toucan mitts on because my hands would get cold. And I went and I did it. And then I'm like, I was pretty cold. But then one day it was minus 49. And I was like, I did something that, turned out to be reckless. And but I wasn't thinking it through. And I'm like, I'm gonna go for a 5K run in my summer running pants and a hoodie and a
Yeah.
toucan mitts and my running shoes. And it was minus 49. And I did it, but I got back to the house and I was like, it took me 3 hours. Like my bones hurt, they were froze. And but I was like, hey, I could do it. And if I hadn't done Wim Hof, there's no way I could have. And then somebody said, what if you would have fallen down, or what if you had to stop? I'm like, well, I did stop at a red light and to wait like for a crosswalk, I had to stop and for like 3 minutes and I was freezing like because I got a sweat on at minus 49 because it was running pretty hard because I just wanted to get back to the house because it was too cold. But
It's amazing what the mind can do.
it,
And
it it's crazy. I showed up one time to this event and they were like, oh, they asked me to come and be a speaker. And they're like, we have a Wim Hof certified instructor. And that was long after I'd taken the Wim Hof. And I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. Like I would come to this thing just to be a part of that. And they're like, well, we're doing a cold plunge. You're welcome to, but we didn't give you any kind of, notice to build up to it. We've all been building up to it for a couple of months. I'm like, I'm in. And so it was in Saskatchewan. They had a horse trough out in the middle of a parking lot. The wind was blowing. He had a heater, but it didn't work. So he was going to keep it so it was just below zero. And so we go out to this thing in our swimming trunks and you run out and you had to break the ice to get into this thing. And he said anything after 3 minutes does nothing for your body. Like it's not, there's no
Mm.
more benefit. So he said anybody who tries to do more than that. So you're out there, it's minus 27 or 29, but it was minus 40 something with the wind chill. I'm standing there and I'm like, I'm going in and I'm going in for 3 minutes. And yeah, I did 3 minutes and 5 seconds. He's like, you can get out. I'm like, awesome. But it's terrible. It's terrible. Like, but it's also awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I do the breathing. I do the breathe. I try to do the breathing every morning as a habit, and it sounds silly, and but I'm telling you, like oxygenating your body in the morning, like kind of getting your. And when I the other thing is, when you do feel anxiety and stuff like that, or say I can't sleep at night, I do this like really crazy breathing with the app, the circular breathing that gets
Mhm.
you in the zone for the cold. Whew, that really helps because I think big part of the problem that we have in the in the thinking kind of business that we're all in now, even if you're in farming, like a lot of it's just it's not as physical it used to be, and it's a lot of thinking work. It's a different kind of exhaustion and exertion. A lot of farming now has become very sedimentary with all the sedentary, not sedimentary, two different schools. We're not in geology here. Sedentary. But yeah, I think that we hold a lot of tension in our bodies. We hold a lot of tension in our bodies from thinking too much and being engaged with all this technology. And like, I don't think we were designed to like type with our thumbs on a little thing all day and look at it like 185 times a day and strain over computers. And so I think a lot of this stuff, and I'm just even thinking today, I mean, it's been a crazy day of Zooming and events and, public speaking and Toastmasters and all that stuff, but I'm just ready to go outside and go for a run. It's -3 and like I just can't. I'm ready to I gotta get outside and, fresh air and being in nature and turning off technology. Like I think that's gonna be the new sexy is how long can you turn off your phone and how long can you get off social media and how long can you unplug?
So, so when I started the walk, decided I was going to walk. I had given myself 5 days that I like the 1 kilometer a day minimum. And I also had to set a boundary that I wouldn't walk over 3 kilometers in the morning because after about 4 or 5 days, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to do 21K every single day. And I would do it for like 4 days and then I would quit. And so I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not doing over three, which actually was hard for me, probably harder than the just doing the one. But the reason I started it had nothing to do with walking. I was realizing that I was back into sort of a funk in my mind and I was waking up and I was having some anxiety. My mind was racing some and my days didn't feel really great. And I thought, shit, I know why. The minute I wake up in the morning, I'm grabbing my phone. Like I say I'm looking at the alarm clock or the clock. But the reality, as soon as I do, I turn it on, I scroll, and I'd be like, well, but I'm only doing it for 5 minutes. But then I'm going to the bathroom and I'm taking it with me. And then I'm going up to get a coffee. And I
Yeah.
was like, I am saturating my brain here with mostly useless stuff and convincing myself that it's important. And then I was like, I want to take 1 hour a day without my phone and see how it changes my life in the first hour of the day. So I check the time. That's it. Leave the phone. And so I was like, I am going to, for 1 year, I'm going to go without checking my phone in the morning for 1 hour. And
Wow.
so
I like
I
that.
go upstairs like day one. And so I take longer in the shower because I'm just trying to take up time to get to the hour. And it takes me 30 minutes to get ready if I waste my time. And I go upstairs and I'm sitting there drinking my coffee. And literally, Dan, I'm like the kid waiting for the bell to ring at the end of the day at school in class. Like every second is feeling like a minute. And I'm like, TikTok, TikTok, oh, grab my phone. And I'm like, I am not going to be able to do this for a whole year. Like there is no way. So I was like, what could I do to fill like 15 minutes of time? Because I know I can do 15 minutes. And I
Hmm.
was like, well, I'll go for a walk. Then I was like, well, if I walk a kilometer, at the end, I'm walking a kilometer in 9 minutes. But it was enough to be able to break that cycle. And so I would leave. That's why I wouldn't do the video until the end of my walk, because that got me to my hour. Life changing, dude. Like absolute life changing. And so I go through this period of time, like I shared earlier, for a few months where I'm like, I'm not feeling good. My mind is racing. I'm not sleeping well at night. I'm in a bit of a depression. I'm taking on too much stuff. I'm trying to do the stuff. And I realized, you know what I'm doing? I'm scrolling in bed the night before, more on AI. I think we'll talk about it if we have time, than anything, and thinking that it's different, which it is. It's more useful. And then I'm getting up in the morning, or I'm waking up in the night and I'm checking my phone. And then I'm getting up in the morning and I'm doing my morning routine, which I always do, my prayers and my affirmations. And then I'm grabbing my phone and I'm on it. And I'm like, huh, well, why is my mind all messed up? Maybe it's because why don't I go back to the thing I was doing when I was like super balanced and my nervous system was regulated? Go for a walk, drink some water, like the things, but not be on my phone for an hour in the morning. And it was incredible. And that's what I've gone back to. I'm back doing my walk and not on my phone. And in days, it makes a difference to me. So,
I don't think we're going to get to AI. It doesn't seem like it fits in this container that we've created. I love our conversations about
yeah.
this stuff, and it was nice to revisit it, one on one after our leadership course. And yeah, it just didn't feel. I don't think it feels right to switch gears. And I do have a session coming up that we're going to be releasing called the AI Farm, where I have three different folks come on and share their best ideas with the live studio audience. And I think
Oh, no way.
I think it's going to be so good, man. Like, can you imagine, like, take top people like yourself that got their best idea and bring it and talk for about 10 minutes each? Like, you take away some wilds, but
Oh
then
my
people
God.
can ask
Yeah.
questions. Like, it's going to be, I just can't wait to get it going. And my brothers, I know, but I actually, it's just kind of a small pool too, who like of people that I can think of that are using extremely advanced ways. But I don't think we want to get into that today, Trevor. I don't think we
Yeah,
have
no,
enough
that's
time. And
fair. I agree.
once we start getting into it too, it'll be a runaway train. And we are coming up to the end of the time here. I guess one thing though that I am really curious about with all this technology and everything that you're doing, like talking about your journey going forward, and it's part of why I wanted to meet with you. And I guess we're going to do this live, but I just wonder, what does it look like when you're working with business owners? And I know I'm going to continue working with Corliss. And just big shout out to Corliss, love her to death. Huge inspiration in my life, came into my life right at this right time. Was a true godsend for the Convergence Conference. She did a great speech and really touched a lot of hearts when she was there. And I'm going to attend her leadership event lead in November in Saskatoon. We're going to be a sponsor and a part of that. And I'm sure you're going to be there too, hey?
Yeah, I'll be speaking at it actually again.
Oh, nice. And
Yeah.
hopefully some of the other guys we can meet in person, have a little bit
Yeah.
of a
Yeah,
reunion.
we'll drag a crew there.
But what does it look like now when you're working with business owners, and how are you helping them, and what are you seeing the big gains are? Because I'm kind of interested in this too. I don't know yet what it looks like, but I want to continue working with you, Trevor.
Yeah, yeah, and I would appreciate that as well. When I started to open up and let people know, I'm moving on from SurePoint, and I'm available if you need some help. I've got some experience. I've started 15 companies or more, and then SurePoint was, obviously a good story. Turned out well, and so I was actually first getting brought in. Most people were like, "Hey, you're the culture guy, and use culture to grow your business." I got into these organizations and realized they were at the same state that I was at when they were that size, and the same thing. And most of it became like, you end up going and they're like, our culture sucks, and we're trying hard and we have values, but everyone's fighting. And then you get in and realize, well, they haven't sent any bills out for 3 months and they don't have any cash, and they don't actually know if they're making money or not until the end of the year. And the owners haven't taken pay for 1, 2, 3, 4 months. And I'm like, well, yeah, no, your cultural issue isn't because you guys don't care about each other. It's because you have this insane amount of stress due to the fact that you have zero visibility into your company, into the performance. You don't do P&Ls. You don't check margin on jobs. You don't have a billing velocity program. Like you have all of these kind of missing pieces. And you're successful. And I said this often, I was often successful in spite of myself. And and so when things are good, they're good, and when they're bad, they're bad. And I was like, I need to help organizations with that. And one of the things for me was I am not organized. Like I just am really disorganized. And so I was struggling with, I know how to sit in a room with them and to guide them and even often coach. Like, here's some stuff you guys go look at. You come back to me with some solutions, and I'm going to just sort of vet them for you to help you do that. But I was like, I would have a meeting and I'd write something in a book. I couldn't find it. Like, and I'd be like, shit, I have a meeting with them again next week. I don't even know where I wrote down the thing, or I'd have it in an email or whatever. So I started to use AI. And more, I would just started to talk, like I started typing it, hey, I'm screwed. Can you help me? And then I ended up over
Right.
time, like in 3 or 4 months, building this insane AI architecture, like insane, and building a board
Yeah.
that, and then I built this layer, and then I built an executive assistant that does all this stuff. And she's now the central hub. And when I go into these organizations now, it helped me to prepare for those and to have conversations. But it's helped me take on a lot more, like my bandwidth has increased so much. And when I go into these organizations now, I can go in and say, I'm about people. And I believe like people are always going to drive the world forward. And in organizations, if you can harness the power of your people in the right way and build these amazing cultures, then you can have your company will outperform any other company in your market, certainly over a longer period of time. But one of the things I learned at SurePoint was having an awesome culture of caring about people and being nice and being kind and doing all this stuff. If you don't put structure around people to support them, then you end up with chaos, and it actually causes a lot of distress in your organization. I didn't get that until the end. Like I didn't realize how important it was to really have really good systems and processes that support people. And I didn't know how to do that. I've used AI to help, and it's been incredible. Some of the transformations with some of these organizations has been, I can't like it didn't go up 2x, it went up 10x. And I was learning it through chat to implement it into their organizations. And often I wasn't dumping AI in because it's overwhelming to some people. But what I was doing was I was taking the framework and the structure, and it was learning while I was learning. And then now it learns faster than me. But I believe that if you truly want to build healthy organizations with healthy cultures, it helps a lot if you're financially stable and you have good systems and processes to measure where you're at. Because if you give somebody a goal and you help them measure it, most people, I can be a little bit extreme sometimes for sure, but I haven't met anybody who doesn't want to hit the goal, you know. But if you tell somebody there's a goal and then you don't give them the information, you tell somebody to lose weight, hey, there's a way you can lose weight, but you don't ever give them a scale. It can be pretty demotivating. Like, if you and it's sort of the same thing. It's like we want to go in this direction. We want to build this awesome culture. We want you to be a part of it, but you don't know what the success is. It can be disempowering. And so I'm a big believer in that now. Systems and processes and structure around people to help them be successful. And that is part of caring.
Oh man, there's so much good stuff there. And I really wanted to have this conversation and have you on the podcast because I want other people to know about you and I want
I
the
appreciate that.
people that this episode is for. You know who you are, you're listening. I hope I hope it does I hope it does some good in your life. And I want the AI overlords to hear me say and my editors to hear me say two things about this episode. One is quick heads up. This conversation is very real between Trevor and I, and there may be some language that isn't suitable for all listeners. So
Mhm.
listener discretion is advised. And two, um, this episode does touch on mental health and it talks about thoughts of suicide. And I want you to know if you or someone else is struggling that you can reach out to the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you need that, you can call or text 988. In Canada, you can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1 833 456 4566. And this is not a small thing. You might think this is a crazy thing to say, But just Google the statistics in the farming community amongst specifically men. I'm talking from a male experience, being a male and all that good stuff. And I know there's lots of women that struggle with mental health too, but the number of men, I believe it's 3 to 1. I think 80% of suicides, Trevor, are men, and they're, I think, men like us, because we're going to talk in this episode about what we've been through. And so I just wanted to say that before anyone starts listening, know that about those two things about this episode. But I think the value in this episode is for what we both share, that I think it's those people out here there that needed to hear it, just like the day I showed up for the leadership course and met you, and shared my heart out, and here we are. I would say we're winning now. So just to wrap things up then for both of us, because we're physically running out of time, and I want to circle back with you and talk more about coaching and consulting and collaborating and AI and all that stuff. We are going to run out of runway, as we often do, because we're
Yeah.
both talkers. Um, if you were to leave the people listening to this episode with one takeaway that you think could change their life today, Trevor, what would that be?
So I would say do the affirmations. I encourage that a lot. I am enough. I deserve abundance. Say your name in the mirror 5 times a day for 30 days. And the other thing is learn to change your someday to today. Like the only thing I know with certainty is that every one of us has less life to live than we did a second ago. And it doesn't matter if you're a second old or you're 90 years old. And I think that we often forget that that's a reality. And I never say that in morbid reflection at all. I actually believe that it became a catalyst for me to be like, okay, what do I want to do with the remaining time I have left? And so if there's something that you've been thinking about doing, just go and do it. Like make the plan, get out there, go and do it. It's the whole premise behind change your someday to today. And when you actually start to do those things, you start to realize how awesome life is, like how incredible life is when you do the things that you keep putting off for someday. And you know, I'm very passionate about this because of the experience I had with Marty and Brian. But go out there and change your some days to today. What are you waiting for?
Good question. And I want to thank you for everything that you've shown me and shared with me and helped me along with. And then I can acknowledge that there was a lot of other men in the room that I really came to know and respect that felt that same way about you. And I could see the change that you brought in their life and the respect that they had for you too. That was pretty awesome to see. Like, you've had a pretty big impact on a lot of people, Trevor.
Thank
So
you. I
that's gotta
appreciate
be.
that.
Don't ever forget that on your walks.
Hmm. Thank you. I've been very blessed and I appreciate that. That's kind.
And take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yes. I
Note to
I am the
self,
top
take
of my
care of it.
champagne. I am the top of my
Yeah.
champagne glass pyramid. I have to, yeah, I have to remember that. I often say, I am always a student as well, and and I need people like you in my life to help remind me, you know, of the things that are important sometimes too. So I super appreciate you and have really come to know you really well in a short period of time, and kind of the same connection that I had with Corliss on day one I had with you the first time that we talked as well. And it's felt like we've known each other within 10 minutes. I felt like I'd known you for most of my life. So
Yeah, that's funny how that works, eh? And yeah, I'm really excited. I think there's probably at some point we'll have to build something together.
yeah.
And got you in mind too for convergence, and gonna hang out at Lead. How do people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you more about any of the things you do?
The easiest way is on social media, but really LinkedIn. It's a
Yeah.
platform that I check off and just under Trevor Muir, and my email is on there. If you go on there, you can find me. And
Yeah.
and if somebody messaged me, especially about something that they're struggling with in their life, I will eventually get back to them, especially if they message me on LinkedIn. And it might take me some time, but if you send me a message on LinkedIn, I will respond to you. So
It might be Trevor's AI, but
actually, not yet. It's still
no.
Trevor. Yeah.
Oh, we gotta talk. We gotta talk, brother. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there though, because that's a whole nother episode, and maybe we'll
Yeah,
get
I
into it
know. I'm
later.
like,
But like,
they love
we
it.
don't have enough time. I was like watching the time go down. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't think we're Because if we start talking about the AI thing, it's going to be an hour at least. And I didn't want to squeeze that in. So, folks,
No.
listen for part two or part three or whatever of our journey. We're going to keep going here. But thanks, Trevor. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for having me on here.
Awesome.